All right, we're back here for another episode of the Baker Fairburn Hockey Show here on a glorious Friday in Western New York, November 21st, 2025. I'm your host, Chris Baker. You can find me on X at Sabres Prospects. Here, as always, with Matthew Fairburn, your Sabres beat writer for The Athletic. You can find everything Matthew's been cooking up all season long over at theathletic.com/Sabres. Holiday season's coming up. Go over there, get your favorite people in your life a subscription to The Athletic. You won't regret it. And you'll probably get a pretty kick-ass gift in return next year for that new subscriber that you gift. If you're watching this on YouTube, like this video, subscribe to the Sabres Prospects YouTube channel and hit that notification bell so you know when a new video drops. And if maybe soon, we'll see, Matthew and I go live. You can find the Baker Fairburn Hockey Show on Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast, and you could please leave a 5-star review. And don't forget to shit all over me in the comments. All right. So Matthew Fairburn, let's just kind of dive right in. Wednesday night, Sabres came out and hosted the lowly Calgary Flames. Calgary gets out to a 2-0 lead. Sabres even it up in the second period. Then the wheels fall off. So just for the formalities, Matthias Samuelsson continued his Norris campaign with his fourth goal of the year. Tage Thompson scored for the fourth straight game and now has 10 on the year. Colton Ellis made 29 saves, gets another blemish on his record. He moves to 3-2 in his third straight start for Colton
Third
Ellis, I
straight
believe that
start,
was.
4 in 5 games for him. So the wheels fell off Colton Ellis a little bit, which, it's part of managing the goalies, right? We'll get to the goalies, but it's, one of pretty low on the list of problems from Wednesday night, I think.
Well, yeah, the problems, that third period was just, here we are again with this team, investing in all the strength and conditioning, and players came into camp in good shape. But those third periods have just been a real problem for this team this year again, as have a lot of things to your comment earlier. But look, after the game, I think there were some pretty choice words said by some of the leaders, de facto leaders for this team, mainly Tage Thompson, Matthias Samuelsson, perhaps some others. I think that's really where we should start today, because there was a word said in one of those comments that I don't think is a good word to hear when you're debriefing from a game, and it's passengers. And let's just kind of dive right into that, Matthew. Yeah, go for it.
Passengers and then soft and casual were two words that Tage Thompson threw out there when talking about the way they competed in puck battles and board battles. So, yeah, those 3 words right there are big ones. And Matthias Samuelsson was the one that said he thought there were too many passengers. Lindy Ruff said he thought they didn't respect the opponent. Tage Thompson took it a step further, said he didn't think they showed a lack of respect for the game of hockey, which I think it kind of hits the nail on the head for this 14-year drought. You go back to the origins of it. They're paying the price for disrespecting the game of hockey in some ways, but
that's pretty intense, saying that you don't respect the game.
It was a lot. It was, and that's what happens when you lose a game like that in the way that they did. It's an interesting dynamic. We talked on when did we get together? Tuesday. They had beaten the Edmonton Oilers 5-1. They had that impressive comeback against the Red Wings, and you were sitting there saying that kept it on the rails. But whatever happens on Wednesday really tells us if this team is growing up in some way and maturing in some way. They aren't in a position, obviously, it's not breaking news to say they're not in a position to be taking anybody lightly. And in a way, I'm not entirely convinced that they did take the Flames lightly. I think that's an easy crutch. It's an easy thing to say that they overlooked the Flames, that it was some sort of trap game. I think it's just the fact that they're right there with the Flames. Like, they're not much better of a team than the Flames. And so the Flames are capable of look, the Flames are a heavy, hardworking, experienced team. They're not playing well right now. They're going through it, but they have a lot of adults in the room. And yeah, they were on the second half of a back to back. They were playing their backup goalie. They were on the road for the second straight game, but they have some guys that took it personally. They are a more mature team with better leadership than the Sabres. And so it's interesting. Like, did they take them lightly, or are the Flames just capable of being a better team than the Sabres? I think the way they played the game, a lot of guys took the night off, right? And they certainly did have too many passengers. But was that because they woke up and said, "Oh, it's the Flames. This will be an easy one"? I don't know if I'm convinced necessarily of that when you're right there in the same bucket. Maybe it's just a case of two bad hockey teams and one of them had the better night.
I think we should probably focus on the leadership a little bit of this team when talking about that. What was it? What led to the effort? You know, the coaches have to get the players up for the games, but the players play the games. And I believe that Matthias Samuelsson also kind of said something similar, right? With the leadership, I do think that Tage Thompson and Rasmus Dahlin are kind of pulling their weight. There's another leader on this team that I'm not convinced is right now in or at least the leadership's been very inconsistent. And when I say leadership, I mean leading by example on the ice. And it's Alex Tuck. And I think there's a concern that's really starting to brew more so than it has at any point in this whole Tuck needs a new contract saga. What did you see from Tuck? Did he speak after the game? Um,
He did he did not. And I'll throw Samuelson into the leaders who have been pulling their weight. He's
yes,
been
absolutely.
one
Yep.
of their
Thank
most
you.
consistent players. I feel like those three guys that you mentioned are three of the guys who have not been passengers. There's been games where Tage Thompson has been a passenger, but I think more so, he's doing what he can to pull his weight. And I think you're spot on about Alex Tuck. If we're gonna go through and try to identify who Matthias Samuelsson might be talking about. Now, I don't know if Matthias Samuelsson was trying to take a shot at Alex Tuck, but if I'm zooming out and saying, okay, who were the passengers? Alex Tuck's on my list. There's a lot of guys on my list, but Alex Tuck's on my list from Wednesday night for sure. So is Owen Power.
Hmm.
And those are two of your, Owen Power is one of your highest paid players, and Alex Tuck is one of the guys wearing a letter. And that's a big part of the problem, right? You know, your highest paid players don't necessarily need to be leaders all the time, but they need to have some sort of leadership. They need to be the guys that are snapping you out of games like this. And when I say that I don't think they played down to the Flames, what I feel like happened is that they felt like they accomplished something with 2 wins. This is their big pattern, right? Tage Thompson mentioned this. We got too high on ourselves after 2 wins. We thought we were better than we are. That's what I think happens with this team. I think it's easy to say, "Oh, it's a last place team. They thought they were going to win." It's more so they relax. They get their backs against the wall. They're scrapping. They get a win. They feel like underdogs against the Oilers. They get up for that game, they get a win, and then they feel like they can relax a little bit, whether it's the Flames or because they won. And it's an indictment of leadership, I think, because they don't know what it looks like to be a real winning team, not just win 2 games in a row, but take care of business on the nights where it's more difficult to get up. It's more difficult to you don't have Connor McDavid circled on the board on Wednesday. So you're not quite as locked in. And you've won a couple of games, so you're feeling pretty good and they just don't know what it looks like. And to have key players like Alex Tuck and Owen Power not going and not locked in, not engaged, not even just not going, right? I mean, Alex Tuck had 0 shots at 5-on-5. He had 2 shots on the power play, but 0 shots at 5-on-5. He has 12 hits all season. And the latest report from Pierre LeBrun is that they're not particularly close in contract talks, that there's still a pretty big gap, and that the Sabres haven't gotten to a double-digit AAV, and there's no guarantee that they're going to get to a double-digit AAV. So I think we're getting pretty close to the point, if we're not there already, where you have to start wondering who's a good fit for Alex Tuck and what that looks like. I think if you're the general manager of this team, if you're the one making decisions about this, you have to gauge where the contract talks are at versus what the trade market is. And it's not where I thought you would be with Alex Tuck, but here's the thing. He has mentioned and he's said all the right things in this about blocking out the contract stuff, focusing on playing, focusing on winning. But I think all of us can see that it's impacting him in some way, and not in the way you would normally hope a contract year would impact a guy, right? Usually you're hoping contract year, this guy's going to play out of his mind to maximize his value. But it feels like the contract stuff has creeped in some way into his head, whether it's impacting his focus or whether it's maybe, who knows it. Maybe it's making him, leave something in the tank. You know, he's just not as locked in and engaged as we've seen him in the last few years. And Tage Thompson said before the season it would be great for morale to get Alex Tuck under contract, right? So how is it impacting the rest of the group, and their consistency, their night to night, when one of their leaders is A, not under contract, and B, it's kind of impacting his game.
Yeah, we talk a lot about veteran leadership, or even sometimes when we talk about bottom of the lineup forwards, guys that maybe they don't always have to be bottom of the lineup forwards. I shouldn't even say that. Just guys that drag your team into the fight. You're 20 games into the season. You've had 8 skaters that have appeared in all 20 games. That's it, just 8. But Alex Tuck's been one of them. Tage Thompson's been one of them. Of the 6 forwards and 2 defensemen. That's what they've had that have appeared in all 20 games.
Dahlin's played probably, 17? Just the 3 that he missed?
Yeah.
So
like injuries really aren't like the excuse, but like you need those guys, like they were here. I guess that's what the brewing concern becomes now with Tuck, because we talked about it a little bit. I don't know if it was the last episode or the one before, maybe it was last Friday. Just, you have to kind of make your decision what you're going to do now. And I think that he's making the decision easier with his inconsistent effort, or maybe not being that guy that constantly is dragging you into the fight, unless there's something going on that we don't know about. And
yeah, he could
sometimes you
be
always have
banged
to
up.
have a little bit. Yeah. You have to, give a little bit of benefit of the doubt always, because we don't always know if they're nursing something. Alex Tuck's historically been a guy that spends a lot of time in the training room. He's also had a lot of wear and tear over the years, regularly playing 20 minutes a night last year. His ice time doesn't look radically different this year. He's had a couple dips here and there, but his ice time really doesn't look radically different.
It was
Although he did
16,
only play
19.
16,
Yeah.
19 against Calgary. But I mean, when you go back and you look at last season, he had a couple games where he dipped below, his normal workload. But so I do want to throw that caveat out there. But no, I agree with you. It's time to determine, if you're running this team, do I need Alex Tuck? Number one, do I need him at the number that he's going to command? Because the market has shifted. And I think it's definitely taken his number out of the Sabres comfort zone. All signs, I think, whether it's performance, but also the business of how they run this team and have a pay structure, I think it's pointing them in one direction. And I think it might be time. Like we said last week on Friday, it's time to make a change at the general manager position. It might be time for them to really just plant their flag in the ground and make their decision what they're going to do and stay ahead of the market, start gauging interest. That's radical. Coming into the season, I didn't see us having this conversation.
No, I thought I saw it as a potential conversation because when he enters the season unsigned, you know how things can get here as early as November and December. But this is part we don't need to go back and have the same conversation we had last Friday. People can go back and listen and, we laid out our position pretty clearly on which direction they should go with this hockey
Nothing's
operations
changed.
department. Nothing has changed there. I
Okay,
know they had
I'm
a
with you
couple of
there.
wins.
Yeah, I'm with you there.
Nothing
Okay.
has changed, and I don't anticipate anything really will change. And the reason I say that and tie that into this conversation just a little bit is I want to reiterate that the reason to change and make a change in hockey operations has to do with situations like this one and the other roster decisions that they have to make. There's a lot of work to do, and they're not, it's going to sound a little weird to say, but I don't feel like the roster is that far off once it gets healthy from, you know, especially in the Eastern Conference with the parity in the NHL. I don't think they're anything close to a playoff team this year just because they've already dug the hole. They're not healthy. And I can't really see this group as constructed. But these decisions that have to be made and these moves that have to be made are really important to what this team looks like next season and beyond. And it starts with Tuck. I mean, there's the 3 goalie saga that they need to figure out. There's they just waived Mason Geertsen, but there's other decisions that need to be made about whether to keep Oslin and Roseanne and how that all looks. But a lot of this starts with Tuck and what you do with him, how much you pay him, or if you don't pay him, how you handle his departure, whether that's trading him and getting a decent return or trying to take this thing right up to July 1 and convince him to stay. Like somebody needs to make that decision and be ready to handle the fallout because there will be some fallout for losing a really popular player. And that's where all of these decisions and the leadership that is needed to navigate them is crucial because you could screw this up. You could screw up the next steps and find yourself in another longer than necessary rebuild. But I think with the right leadership and the right moves, losing Alex Tuck doesn't need to mean that you lose the faith of Tage Thompson and Rasmus Dahlin also. I think you
I
can
think they're both
keep
bought in,
I think
honestly.
you can keep this thing on the rails, which I wouldn't necessarily have thought maybe in the summer, but I do think you can keep this thing on the rails with the right leadership and direction and vision. You can get those guys. I think to your point, they are bought in. The way they're playing suggests that, but I think they can remain bought in, but they might need the right leadership around them in the dressing room and in the front office.
Coming into the season on our show sheet, or this was over the summer, just thinking about Kevin coming back and, maybe not a lot of inspiration coming from the front office for this team, certainly for the fan base. I had this thought that I was like, Rasmus needs to get these guys together. And it's almost like Go Major League, the movie Major League. Like we have headwinds against us all around us. If the they're not going to the front office isn't going to magically wave its wand and get this team in the playoffs. We have to do it ourselves, guys. So let's just win the whole thing, right? Maybe in this case, it's make the playoffs. In the movie Major League, though, they had, what was it, Jake Taylor, the veteran, the leader, the guy that had all the experience. I don't know if this group has that. I know it's not the best analogy, but I think leadership underscores or lack thereof the problems that they have. To your point about Rasmus and Tage, like Thompson is not an asset that I can trade right now because I think that he is your greatest asset to build your team moving forward with Darlene. That contract,
Such a good
everything,
contract.
such a good contract for the production, everything else. That's how I get to Tuck. And you say a lot, work around the edges, win in the margins, right? It's a strategic move to make your team better because when you look at this team's most like best assets to trade, the common ones always come out there. Peyton Krebs, maybe Jack Quinn, so on.
Lukanen.
Lukanen, right? Okay, but what are you getting in return? I'm talking about hockey trades, your best assets to make a trade. Tuck right now, top of the list. I mean, there's
Tuck
three big ones to me that stand out that would move the needle on a trade. Tuck, and who do you think the other two are in my mind? We're gonna say the same ones because it's pretty obvious.
Owen Power and Bowen Byram are,
Those are the two.
and
Yep.
it's situation dependent. Alex Tuck's number 3 on the Athletics trade board. First one came out this week from CJ. He was the only Sabre on there. I bring up Power because of the way he's playing and that he may still have some value as a former number 1 overall. Well, he's a number 1 overall pick. Former is
Yeah.
grammatically incorrect. He'll always be a number 1 overall pick. He's got the contract. He's under team control. You might find a suitor there. He might still have some value. And Byram is the contract. He's got, now about a year and a half left before he becomes a UFA. So that's a situation I think to monitor until he's under contract for longer than that. And you have a surplus, obviously, I think, at left-hand defenseman, both on the NHL roster and organizational depth. You've got a pretty decent situation there. So those are the three I look at. I would throw Luukkonen in that bucket, I guess, but as far as value goes, that he's not nearly as valuable as Tuck, Power, or Byram. And you don't want to rip things down to the studs, right? You just don't want to do that. It shouldn't be what happens. And with the right vision and direction, the players shouldn't, want that. I don't think you can't just open the door, right? If Tuck leaves and say anybody else want out, right? And you just trade guys for spare parts because then you end up back where they were when Eichel and Reinhart and Ristolainen and Linus Ullmark and Brandon Montour were all gone within a few months, and you're back with one of the worst rosters in the NHL. It's just not. It's not where they are. It's not. They have a lot of young players still, and they have even some of these other pieces like Doan and Kesselring are like coming into that age range that you want. Even Thompson and Dahlin are where you want them to be, as long as you can keep them bought in. So they're, people think that a Tuck trade is destined to be a futures trade, and it could be, but I think it could be a combo too. I think you could get a piece back, a young player, a prospect that's maybe on the cusp of breaking through. I think you could potentially make a hockey trade because I don't think Tuck's issue right now is that he is dead set on getting to July 1 because of the market. If Pierre LeBrun, based on Pierre LeBrun's reporting, Tuck is well within his rights to not have pen to paper right now, simply based on dollars, right? The market says he should probably get double digits, 10 on the AAV. We've discussed the signing bonus piece of this that I'm sure is also causing some friction. And that's not even mentioning the fact that maybe he doesn't want to sign up for more of what's gone on here in Buffalo. He's not totally convinced that they can win. If he gets sent to a place where he feels like some of those factors are different, I wouldn't be surprised if he gets traded and puts pen to paper pretty soon thereafter. And that changes the calculus on a trade a little bit. If a team thinks that they can extend a guy, they're not just getting a rental. But if you want to do that, you have to start doing it pretty soon because the closer you get to the deadline, the more he feels like a rental to teams, the more it feels like you're just getting a few months and a playoff push out of him. But right now, I think teams could be convinced that they're getting a little bit more. And so maybe you get a little bit more in a trade. Probably don't need to retain money because he's only making 4.75. It's kind of a bargain contract, and the cap hit would even be less because he's already played some games. But you could retain. You know, if there's a team that's really squeezed and you
I don't see the point.
but
I
I
don't see
think
the point.
I think most likely you're getting some money back anyways, right? You're getting a player of some sort, and so it'll be interesting if they go that route, and I think we'll get into at some point, and maybe even today, throw out some teams. We don't have, we started batting around some ideas yesterday, but don't have really formal potential targets, and but there are some teams that it's pretty easy to point to that would make sense that we can get to at some point, but it is reaching a decision point,
Yes.
especially you have a loss like you did on Wednesday, and they're not. We we brought up the Canadians, right, on one show recently that
Let's throw
they
that stat out there again, just as
that
of today, if you have it. Yeah,
on
or
this
yesterday.
day last year, the Canadians, I believe, were still in last place. Let's pull it up real quick. I have the standings page here from November of what 2024 is what I need here. November 21st, 2024. The Montreal Canadiens were 7-10-2 with 16 standing points, minus 17 goal differential. Last place in the Eastern Conference, 5 points out of a wild card spot, and they stormed all the way back to get one. Now you may think that's reason to, well, actually nobody probably thinks this, but that's reason to stay the course, right? Like maybe they can turn this thing around when they get healthy. To me, that's reason why making some moves, making necessary changes, even at the top with the general manager, is important because maybe the season isn't totally off the rail. Like if there's even a sliver of a chance that you can fight your way back into it, you need to you need some leadership to do it. You need some moves to be made. You need some vision. You need the players to believe something. You need to rattle some cages a little bit. And otherwise, I think most of us sit there and see a game on Wednesday and say that's not a team that's going to pull what the Canadians pulled. But it is a wide open year in the Eastern Conference. I think the Sabres are probably what
6.
6 points out now. I mean, they're not. I'm not feeling real confident that they're going to do it. I mean, Dom has them at like a 26 or 30% chance to make the playoffs.
30%-ish, I think, is what he had him at. So, I don't want anyone to think that me personally, like that I'm trying to push Alex Tuck out of town. What I'm saying is that as much as you can, you got to stay ahead of it. I don't know how much longer you give yourself to make the decision, but it can't be, January 1, I don't think. Honestly, I think you really got to look at a 5-game window here and say, "Okay, I got to figure it out. I got to know what I'm doing with this." And that's what I'm saying. I'm planting the flag and getting your decision made so you could create a market for Alex Tuck and get your best return back if you elect that he's not a $10.5 million player for you for your business model. That's all I'm saying. And I'm not singling him out. That's why I wanted
Even
to
for your
mention the other
hockey
guys.
model,
Yeah.
like even for your hockey model,
Oh, sure.
like we can
Sure.
talk business and we have, right? That between signing bonus money and I mean, they are spending to the cap now, but yeah, there's that piece of it. But there is a case to be made, a hockey case to be made that the trade is the best move, depending on how far the gap is. Now, the gap is of their own doing, I think. Could they have gotten them for less than double digits in the summer? Maybe.
I think they
Maybe.
could have. Oh,
I,
yeah.
I, I
The
think
market has shifted, man. Yeah.
the market has shifted in a big way. If they structured a contract with the necessary signing bonus up front, could they have gotten them for less than double digits? I think there's a decent chance they could have. I had 9.5 kind of as the number that made sense for him based on the Bushnevich contract and some other factors. Like 8 by 9.5, I think would have been
Would
in
you
the
do that
ballpark.
now? Would you do that now if you're the Sabres?
8 by 9.5.
Like right now, even given everything that we just talked about,
I think I
cap
would.
going up.
I think I would. I think
I think I would too. So it's like let's balance out the conversation a little bit, right? That's what
yeah.
I mean. We're not pushing him out.
But if he's not there, right? If he's not, then you do have to make a decision at some point, and there can be a world where it can benefit you. Look at the Paterka trade, right? That trade, I think, has benefited them in some ways. It hasn't shown the full effect yet because Kesselring hasn't been healthy, but Doan is a real nice addition to this group, to this culture, to what you're building. So I think there is definitely the other piece of this that is, somewhat minor, but a real factor when you talk about deciding, in the next however many games. He does have a history of getting banged up, right? So, there is that risk here as well. He gets banged up, all of a sudden he doesn't have much value or his value goes down. And, it's less important of a factor, but it's still something in the back of your head, I think.
On that topic, you see this sometimes on social media, comments on stories or videos on this YouTube channel. Subscribe to this channel, like this video. I don't buy into Alex Tuck's in a contract year. He doesn't want to get banged up and lose his, ability to earn or, have his next contract. I don't buy into that. I really don't.
No, I
I
think
think
he
you're
if anything, he's just distracted
yes,
and
yes.
not focused. That's why, like, when we were talking about it earlier, it's like, yeah, I don't think he's making business decisions out there. I think he's just his head's a little clouded with all of it, and it would be almost impossible for it not to be because it's not a normal year. It's not any other year, and it does have to enter into the conversations you're having with your agent, with your family, everything. It's a constant drumbeat, and frankly, he hasn't had to talk about it publicly all that much, so it's not even that, it's not like every day we're going in there asking him about it or asking his teammates about it. It's just kind of hanging over a lot of things. So, yeah, it becomes a through line to the season. The conversation becomes a through line, and maybe people are sick of the conversation, but I think the conversation has shifted to the point where it's worth bringing up this part of it because I don't think
Yeah.
we've really gotten to this point in any of our other conversations of really thinking it could it could be the right proactive move to get ahead of this if especially as teams look around and think, man, this free agent class is not good all of a sudden, right? What looked like one of the great free agent classes we might ever see, of course, became not that when everybody re-signed. And Kempe being the latest, there could be others, right? But you're looking at Panarin, Schmaltz, and Tuck at the top of the board of unrestricted free agents for forwards, and teams might want to get ahead of that and look at Tuck and say we can fit him in this year, of course, at 4.75 and fit him in beyond that because the cap's going up and there's a lot of teams with space and there's not much to spend it on.
Yeah.
So I think it would be it'll be an interesting situation to follow, probably right up until either he signs or the deadline.
Yeah. Maybe it's that I mean, that's a month away, that roster freeze around the holidays. They gotta know what they're doing it at the latest by then. I'm not gonna put you totally on the spot, but maybe a yes or no question. Do we think it's a 50-50 thing right
Somewhere in
now
there,
that Alex Tuck is a Buffalo Sabre in 2026, 27? 50-50 right now?
it's probably yeah. Do we think it might even be less? Like 40 that he stays and 60 that he's not.
Yeah.
If there's a gap in negotiations, then I start to think, I mean, that can change. So it's always a bit of a guessing game. But yeah, it's a toss up for sure.
Fascinating conversation, so let's not get into the teams. Let's save that a little bit because I think they need a few more games to kind of see, and so do we, right? But I would say, yeah, let's just table the suitors. But I have some ideas of where he makes sense, and well, that's for another day. If Alex Tuck it moves on, whether it's in season, next season, potential replacements in the system. I sent you a text earlier this week. We were talking about Isak Rosén, Noah Ostlund. Ice time was down a little bit in the last game. We could talk about roster decisions as this team returns to health and so on. But just on Rosén, if you look at him in totality, let's just forget about the goals. Let's talk stylistically for a second because Alex Tuck, he brings you goals when he's firing. He can score. Is Rosane kind of a hybrid? Is he like a Tuck replacement long term, you think, in this organization, given this little snapshot? Again, forget the goals, but just think about the player profile, the penalty killing, the defensive awareness, or because I almost think that that's where I started my thought process is like, yeah, he'd be a poor man's Tuck, but is he more of that hybrid between a Tuck and like a Jack Quinn?
Yeah, he obviously doesn't have the size of Tuck, right? But the way Tuck plays isn't 6'4", 220 either, right? He doesn't
Right.
play that big. He's not, even though his hits are down this year, he's not a huge heavy hitter even when he's going. So I can see it a little bit where you have, and I mean, you've also got Doan, who is, kind of that defensive, responsible type of player. I think what makes Roseanne stylistically a little bit more of a poor man's Tuck, as you put it, is the skating, right? He's got juice just like Tuck does. He's got speed, the defensive stick that is coming along. He had a tough one against the Flames where should
Lost
have,
his man.
he lost
Didn't
his man,
play.
should have tied that guy up. Strength is still coming for him, but and I don't know that I see a 36 goal season in his
Right.
future, but there are some components. What's the line from the Moneyball? Like, you gotta replace him in the aggregate, right? Like,
Mhm.
you
Yeah.
gotta find way you're probably not gonna find a one-to-one for Tuck, but do you have enough depth in your organization to fill in around the edges if you were to lose him? Maybe. You might be, uh I think Roseanne has taken this 10-game, 9-game sample, however long he's been up, and he has changed the conversation around what he can become and what he can be for your team, which was a development that they needed. They needed, and we'll see where he goes. Was it just 7 or 8 games where he was hot and he's going to fade, or was Wednesday night the blip and he's got his window is shrinking here because Benson's coming back and Zucker's coming back tonight against the Blackhawks. Benson might be, I think there's a chance Benson could be back tonight, but maybe Sunday, if not, the game after that. So all of a sudden that window is closing a little bit for guys like Roseanne and Oslin. But I've liked what I've seen from Roseanne. So it's a little crazy when you first hear it to think of him as a potential Tuck replacement, but there are elements of his game that fill
There is,
that
there
role a little bit.
is. Even, if you go back and you watch how Isak Rosén has developed the past couple of years in Rochester, started getting to the middle more, even when Rosén tips pucks for goals, it's not right at the doorstep. It's 7, 8, 10 feet cruising through between the hash marks, getting his stick on a puck. Tuck does that too, and Tuck had a ton of tip goals last year. Isak Rosén, 0.33 goals per game this year for the Sabres. Alex Tuck, 0.35 goals per game this year for the Sabres. I just want to throw it out there. I think stylistically, you can fill a gap there. The window is probably shrinking a little bit for those young players as they return to health. And by the way, to go back to something earlier, if this team is healthy, Danforth, Benson, get all these guys back, they can compete. They can compete. The pieces they showed it when they had a semblance of health that they were competitive. I'm not
Even if
throwing you're 25% of the way into the season. Like, I'm not throwing it in. Like, the Tuck conversation that we're having does not imply that and I know you've already said that. I want to say it clearly. You're not throwing in the towel if you consider moving Tuck and having a young guy sit up here, but it's not having a young guy move up into that spot is not ideal either.
No, you can't throw it in for a few different reasons. Number 1 is that, I mean, the Eastern Conference is pretty wide open. I'm not sitting here feeling like good about the Sabres' chances of turning it around because a game like Wednesday night shows that they still have a lot of growing up to do, and they still are capable of losing games that they really shouldn't lose. But The other reason I don't think you throw it in is because it's vitally important to what you're trying to do beyond this season, to developing players and trying to stay in the fight, and you're not pulling the plug. This is it's why I say I don't think this is a complete tear down in any way, shape, or form. Even if like I just don't envision Darlene getting to the point where he would be, you know, asking out. I don't envision that imminently anyways with Tage Thompson either. And so as long as those guys are bought in, I think a lot of other guys are going to be bought in as well. You got to get guys pulling in the same direction, and you can't sit here and I get the instinct, and my instinct is they lose to the Flames. It's over, right? Like you can't lose to the Flames and pretend to be taken seriously. But in that room, you certainly can't be thinking that way, and they got to make sure that guys aren't thinking that way. And I do think one of the key things, I've said it before, I don't like Josh Norris when he gets healthy, I think has the potential to be their best forward. And at least their most complete forward. They're all around forward, and he's the type of player that they really need to tie their lineup together.
Yeah.
And you could have Tage Thompson, Josh Norris, 1-2 down the middle, which all of a sudden isn't that bad of a center group. And Tage Thompson's playing pretty good in the middle right now. So if you have that, the rest of the pieces start to fall into place. To your point, I think Danforth, as people are working their way through these, what does the roster look like? And I posted something at The Athletic this morning, reacting to the Geertsen news, but also looking at some of the decisions that are to come with this team and what the lineup could look like when everyone's healthy. And I didn't include Kulik because we just don't know
Yeah.
when he'll be back with the blood clot issue. But I've seen some people suggest like, oh, you got to move on from Danforth. And I don't think that's the case at all. I think Danforth is a pretty important piece. You look at what Malenstein brings, the energy every night, the hard forecheck. He's becoming a really valuable player. Danforth, I think, can bring a lot of the same things and some of the maturity, right? Some of the veteran leadership is definitely there with Danforth. It's just a shame that they haven't gotten any of it because he's been out of the lineup.
Danforth
By
wins faceoffs when he takes them down the middle, and the leadership that comes with a guy. Again, he's not maybe like that's not the first word that you think about when Danforth comes up, but I think there is some of that with his experience and his route
his route
as a
for
mature
sure.
human being in the locker room and on the bench during the games. I I'm not moving on from Danforth to keep Oslin or
No,
Roseanne up.
no way.
As good as they're doing and as much pop as they're bringing into the lineup, I'm putting the veteran guys in there because the team is devoid of that uh, men
And I
in
know
the
it
room.
looks like it's just easy to move the guys down that don't need waivers, but it also could be the best thing for them to have them as essentially your fifth line, right? The top line in Rochester ready to go because you can bring them up when somebody
Keep
gets
them
hurt,
hungry.
keep them
Get them
hungry,
hungry.
and even put the other guys on notice. Like I wrote this morning, like it could be the best thing to have some competition for Quinn, Krebs, Greenway, Kozak, McLeod, whoever, that, okay, McLeod's not going at center. Maybe you can move him to the wing and call up Oslin, in a spot, if a guy's banged up or something. All these little things, like you want the organizational competition. And I think Oslin and Roseanne have now provided that, even if they go back down, because they're right there, ready to
Yeah.
go. And they're more ready and more confident and hungrier, to your point, the next time they come up. That's not a bad thing. And the experience piece is important because you're already one of the youngest teams in the league. And with the condensed schedule, you're going to need more bodies. You're going to need a lot of guys to get through the season because we look at what is it going to look like when they're fully healthy. They might not be fully healthy at all, because
No
when these
team
guys
might be fully healthy this
exactly,
year
there's
with
a
all the
lot of
injuries.
injuries
Holy
all over
shit.
all over the league, and so Norris might come
Yeah.
back and somebody else might go down. Danforth comes back and somebody else might miss a few games. There's gonna be opportunity for Osland and Roseanne to get up and get more games. You don't need to make maybe a knee-jerk, short-sighted reaction just because they've had a good stint. Like, getting rid of a Danforth doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Now, if there's a trade out there, this is where, the trade piece comes into this, and again, where we come back to the general manager and why this is important and why you need vision and leadership in that spot. Because, yeah, a Jack Quinn trade, I'm not opposed to a Jack Quinn trade if the right one is out there. Or, you know, Krebs to a lesser extent. Like, Krebs to me is an okay 13th forward to have, but if there is the right deal to be made out there that opens up some room, and then you can bring up Roseanne or Osland like that, that's fine by me. But you don't need to be waiving otherwise potentially valuable either players or even just assets
Yeah.
when you can move a guy down freely like you can with Osland and Roseanne.
I like having the young kids here. I like having them here. I think, like, while they're
It's
here right
fun.
now, they're fun, they're playing well. I think they're getting experience. I mean, hell, we just talked about it a couple days ago, should they go and, like, crash with Darlene? And they still can. But as the team returns to health, it creates this issues because they haven't done anything to kind of ease that roster pressure. If they don't trade a skater, there are other levers that we should probably talk about for like a couple of minutes before we get out of here today. They still have 3 goalies on the roster. Colton Ellis had a little bit of a not a sparkling performance against Calgary.
Bit of a letdown, right? A bit of I don't love how, like, it seems like they've been doing this where there's riding the hot hand and then there's having a little bit of awareness about when to pull off, right? And look, maybe this was a natural letdown spot for either Colton Ellis or the whole team, right? The emotional letdown off of the high of a comeback win and beating Connor McDavid. And then, hey, there's going to be a letdown spot. Maybe you go to your veteran, you know, goaltender who has become a bit of a leader, who plays with quite a bit of emotion. Maybe that could have, hindsight's 2020, but it's also not entirely hindsight because it's like this happens all the time where it's like, let's ride the hot hand. Well, guess what? Eventually the hot hand's going to burn out.
They
And you need,
showcasing Ellis for a trade.
I mean, may I don't know, maybe. Certainly putting Luukkonen in has not helped showcase him for a trade. Like, it hasn't been helping his value to play Luukkonen, right? It seems like he's had one good game out of the 4 that he's played. That contract would not be easy to move, but I don't think you can carry 3 goaltenders too much longer. I don't think it's necessary. And I think Luukkonen is the odd man out in my eyes. I look at, who does Lindy Ruff trust? He trusts Alex Lyon, and I think he trusts Colton Ellis more than he trusts Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen. His actions have shown you that. Even some of his words, he said, we can't be sure if he's going to stay healthy. And I also, I don't know, I look at the way the team has played. I look at big saves and key moments. All right, key saves that turn games. Luukkonen's not making those. He's having one a game in a spot that kind of bag deflators, right?
Bag deflators, and it's all on tracking. It's not positioning, it's
No, yeah,
tracking.
it's like losing the puck. The glove side is hurting him. Is there a good goalie in there somewhere? Is there a guy that could resurrect his career and play some good hockey? Yeah,
Yes, there is.
probably.
Yes, there
There
is.
is. Like, I mean, he's got the pedigree. He's had moments in his NHL career where he could be that guy. We see it all the time with goalies, though, where teams are quick to, pull the plug, or a change of scenery sometimes sparks something in a player. He feels like a guy that needs that, and I'm not terrified of him becoming something Linus Ullmark like elsewhere. And even if it happens, you could have the same fear about Colton Ellis, right? The guy I'm not touching is Alex Lyon. Alex
No need.
Lyon
Yeah.
Alex Lyon is staying if I'm running things. Like, he's your best goalie right now. He's a great guy to have in the room. He's on a good deal for this year and next year, and I think could remain effective beyond that as a veteran backup. Like, I want this guy on my team. And so that leaves Ellis or Luukkonen. And I know it's a small sample size with Ellis, but this team really wanted him for a reason. And I don't think he's done anything since he's been on the ice to make them feel worse about that. So, but he also showed on Wednesday night a reminder that it was a small sample size, right? And you don't know what he is. But the reason I'm okay moving off Luukkonen is because if Ellis goes through it for a while, you have Levi.
Mhm.
And I have not given up on Devin Levi either. So, you can call him up and get some spot starts and push Ellis that way, but or find another goalie on
In terms
waivers.
of
I mean,
keeping guys hungry, Devin Levi has gotta be starving.
I would think. I mean, he's got to have definitely a fire lit underneath him. Especially the way Mike Leone talked after he pulled him. Like, I think this guy should be pretty hungry. It's kind of a weird situation down there with Georgiev,
Yep,
playing a little bit.
lineman.
And yeah, it's a weird goalie room for sure.
Yeah.
But he should be hungry and ready to go, and in spot starts could give you something. So they're going to have to make a decision at some point because all four of these guys are under contract for next year, and that's not sustainable. Like Devin Levi, I don't think can spend a whole another year in the AHL. I think he needs waivers anyways. So you're in a spot where you're going to have to make some sort of decision, and it feels like Luukkonen is going to get squeezed out of the picture. But getting somebody to take that contract is not going to be easy. There's 3 years left on it beyond this season at $4.75 million a year. And that's a even in a rising cap world, a big number for a goalie that's kind of a question mark.
We've seen other goalies in a similar spot at a similar number get moved. I would never say never. Corpusalo comes to mind. There's other guys that come to mind.
You're not going to
Um,
get a ton for him, probably.
and you can retain. You have all your slots left. You can eat a little bit of that. They don't want to, but they could if they really, when push comes to shove, have to make a deal. Um, but in the short term, they already waived Geertsen. You still have to find room, I think, if they get 100% healthy. And so it's almost like, forget the long term. Like in the short term, I think they got to kind of really manage their way through that also.
And Dunn could be a guy that goes down at some point also,
Yep.
but I think Dunn got a little job security with the Geertsen news yesterday because
Yep.
I don't think the Geertsen news signals that Lindy Ruff has come to the conclusion that they don't need an enforcer. I think the fact that they held on to him so long shows that Lindy Ruff really valued that, and they probably should have waived him a little while ago, but because they were, healthy or they weren't healthy and they needed the bodies, it was fine to have them around. But you can't have three goalies and Geertsen, right? But Dunn is a willing combatant as far as fighting goes and a better player. He's a more
Yeah.
trustworthy, and he didn't have a great game either the other night, but nobody really did. So I think that helps him because he has a defined role. Same goes for Kozak. Like, these guys are kind of locked into these bottom six spots, and they're useful in those roles. Whereas Roseanne and Osland, if they're not getting the power play time, and if they're not playing in your top nine, it serves them better to go down to Rochester, keep playing, get the power play time, the top line minutes, and be ready for when the next call up comes because it will come.
On merit, Rosane probably stays if Oslin goes back down. Like, who's the first? Like we always talk about him in pair as a pair, but the reality is that but Oslin's playing ability to play center factors into this, doesn't it?
Well, because the wingers are the ones who are coming back,
They're
right?
coming back and getting
Zucker,
healthy. That's why I said on merit,
but now that
Rosane.
Tage Thompson's playing in the middle, what's tricky about it is Zucker's coming back, right? And he plays the net front on the power play. They've had Osland at the net front on the power
Mhm.
play. So
I like
Benson
him there.
comes back. He'll probably push Roseanne off the power play. Tage Thompson playing center makes you think, okay, you know, Kozak is kind of your third center right now. McLeod, your second. Thompson, your first. Are you keeping Osland around to play fourth line center and not play on
Mhm.
the power play? Or do you keep
Man.
Roseanne around as an extra winger and move Krebs to the middle on that line, and you got Krebs, Mallenstein, Dunn, or even could throw Roseanne on that line? I think Osland might be the first to go down, but I could see it either way because the wingers are the ones who are coming back and getting healthy, so that could push Roseanne out of the picture,
Yeah.
albeit,
Here
just for the time being.
here's a cliffhanger for next episode. I wanna talk about McLeod. We'll get to that at a future episode. Sabres host Chicago tonight on it's Friday, the 21st. Back in action on Sunday afternoon, 1 o'clock kickoff at KeyBank Center against Carolina. And then they have a couple days off. They go down to Pittsburgh on Wednesday before enjoying turkey, stuffing, everything else. We'll do our Thanksgiving food rankings next time we're together, Matthew Fairburn. But in the meantime, if you could, please do your plugs.
Yeah, head to theathletic.com/sabres. As I mentioned, I have a full breakdown of what's to come here roster wise, and of course had a column reacting to that smoldering tire fire of a loss on Wednesday night, and I'll be on the scene all weekend to chronicle whatever comes next with this group. So theathletic.com/sabres is the spot to find everything there, and of course the Sabres Prospects YouTube channel for our next episodes to come, which will be before too long here.
All right. I'm going to get us out of here. Hope everyone has a lovely Friday. For Matthew Fairburn, you just heard where you can find him. Go there and do that. For the production crew who just heard me talk about Thanksgiving, they're like getting excited. It's the production crew's favorite food holiday. I'm Chris Baker. Thanks everyone for making the Baker Fairburn Hockey Show part of your routine. TGIF. We'll see you again next time.